From the studios of Farm Journal Broadcast, this is AgDay.
Coming up on AgDay, 2019 was one for the weather records, but could history repeat itself again this year? What a quick look back in the books can tell us. We have a phase one trade deal with China, so when will we see that country making some big ag buy?
I would argue it's probably a best case scenario.
As President Trump takes a victory lap at this year's American Farm Bureau Convention.
We did it! We did it!
Good morning, I'm Clinton Griffiths. Happening later today, the American Farm Bureau Federation Annual Convention coming to a close in Austin, Texas. USDA Secretary Sonny Perdue holding a news conference from the event yesterday afternoon.
Farmers have been so productive, but we've been guilty of one thing. We've stayed behind that farm gate, just do what we do and expect people to understand. We've got to speak out in local areas. We've got to speak out statewide. We've got to speak out nationally.
But the big talk at this year's convention was a speech by President Trump, the president speaking for a third year in a row at the convention, drawing big applause and talking about the phase one trade deal signed last week with China and the Senate approving the new U.S.-Mexico-Canada agreement. The president telling those gathered, quote, "We did it."
The deal with China will tear down market barriers and pry open vast new markets for American beef, pork, poultry, seafood, soybeans, rice, dairy, infant formula, animal feed, biotechnology, and much, much more. This is an incredible success for our entire country, and it was your fortitude, your perseverance, and your devotion that made it all possible.
The president also touching on topics such as biofuels and the environment, specifically the waters of the U.S. rules, saying, quote, "When it comes to the environment, I will always trust a farmer over a Washington bureaucrat or a left-wing extremist," end quote. Many farmers telling us they liked what they heard, saying the president did what he said he would do.
When you have multiple markets that are opening up and expanding and shipping product back to China, hopefully will be a good thing, get more product moving out and lower our stocks, and working freely with our close countries such as Mexico and Canada is always good because you have reduced transportation costs. So let's work closely with those closest to us.
He's doing what we need done. You know, he's helping with some regulations, some unreasonable ones like WOTUS. We need to know, what's regulated on our farm and what's not, or what's a water of the U.S. And he's helping with that. He's helping with trade. We've taken some tough hits in the short term, but for long-term gains, I think.
While the president touts the trade agreement on paper, the market continues to wait for signs of a thaw at the nation's ports. The president's chief trade negotiator for agriculture, Ambassador Greg Dowd, says give it a little time. He says the result of those 33 negotiating sessions and hundreds of hours in talks are very specific time frames for implementation. The agreement takes 30 days to be official, and then within the document are targeted dates for implementation of each stated goal, some 5, some 10, some 20 days.
If you go back and look at, we opened the poultry market 14th of November. It was on Wednesday or Tuesday. The first shipment of poultry arrived in China. So what I'm saying here is 30 days entry into force, 30 days to get the changes made, and another 60 days to actually potentially get beef into China. So we're talking about at a minimum 120 days, 4 months, before we have the first shipment land in China. I would argue is probably a best case scenario.
Dowd believes these negotiations will ultimately prove significant, adding that multiple other talks are still in the works, including the possibility of deals in the UK, Africa, and India. Now, tomorrow on AgDay, we'll continue our exclusive behind-the-scenes look at what it took to get the deal with China and what it could mean for the pet food industry. Now, Dowd couldn't say much about India due to ongoing negotiations. And we first told you that a possible trade deal with India is in the works yesterday, with sources saying the president wants to travel there soon. Sources say it will depend on how long it takes for the Senate impeachment trial to end. Some are predicting it could happen by February 4th, when the president is scheduled to give his State of the Union address. The accord with India, if announced, would include increased market access in India for U.S. farm products, including produce and dairy products. Despite impeachment talk, President Trump is continuing to enjoy strong support from farm country. A new Pulse poll shows he has his highest approval ratings yet. His overall job approval rating ticked up a point this month to 83%. Only 16% disapprove. The strongly approved category went up 3 percentage points from December. Farm Journal Washington correspondent Jim Wiesmeyer saying the president needs the rule vote to keep the same states he won in 2016 in his win column for November. The National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, or NOAA, says 2019 was the second wettest year on record for the United States, behind 1973 by less than an inch. But is last year just an anomaly, or could there be a trend when it comes to wet weather? AgDay national reporter Betsy Gibbon joins us from the newsroom. Now, Betsy, you talked with an expert about the similarities and differences between the wettest year on record and last year.
Clinton, here's what NOAA says are the differences between 1973 and 2019. If you look at these maps side by side, you can see that the rain totals in 1973 were in more of a condensed area, while 2019 was a little bit more of a broad footprint. The real question is if history can repeat. Gleason says it's too early to tell if 2020 will be similar to 1974, the year after the wettest year on record, but they're still looking at the data.
1974 seemed a little less of an issue. Like after the wettest year, there were pockets and areas that were wetter than average and drier than average, but by and large, it was a much more dry year. So things kind of went back and settled back into a more normal pattern.
Gleason says the first 3 months of 1974 were wet across the Pacific Northwest and a little bit across the lower Mississippi Valley, but mostly dry in the northern plains.
Moving into the late spring and early summer, much of the western half of the lower 48 was very, very dry, with pockets of wetness in the Midwest and across the Southeast. Then as we move more towards fall, looking at July through September, Texas was very, very wet. Parts of the Mississippi and Ohio valleys were also wet, with pretty pronounced dryness in the central northern plains and throughout the Rockies.
For October through December, the Four Corners region of the Southwest and Texas had above average precipitation, while the rest of the U.S. had slightly lower precipitation as a whole. Gleason says the years prior to the wettest years on record, 1972 and 2018, were very similar in the fall when it came to wet, soggy, and saturated conditions. Clinton?
All right, thanks, Betsy. After a messy weekend filled with snow, rain, and ice, now we're getting ready for another weather maker. Meteorologist Mike Hoffman joins us with an update. Mike.
Thanks, Clinton. Yeah, we get rid of one storm. It's moved offshore in the east, big high pressure dominating, and we have 2 more storms coming our way. In the western parts of the country, one around the Four Corner region, which could definitely use the moisture. That's some good news there. And some snow in the mountains for skiers, and the Pacific Northwest into Northern California. Next system causing some rain and mountain snows. Neither one of those are a huge system. Now, since many portions of the country haven't seen the sun in a while, it only makes sense that we show a picture that's more spectacular. Locust Hill Farm in Galena, Maryland, sharing this with us. That's in the eastern part of the state. The sun poking through the fog over the fields there. I'll have more on your forecast coming up in just a few minutes.
The ag community suffering some losses over the weekend. American Farm Bureau Federation President Zippy Duvall not attending the convention this weekend after the passing of his wife. AFB reporting Bonnie Duvall, wife of Zippy Duvall, passed away over the weekend after a courageous battle with ovarian cancer. She was chosen for the 1982 National Young Farmer and Rancher Award along with Zippy and traveled with him for 33 years. She kept the books on the couple's Georgia farm, which enabled Zippy to turn his attention to serving farmers on a county, state, and then national level. And produce industry pioneer Frida Rappaport Kaplan has passed away. She was widely praised for her role in elevating the role of women in the fresh produce business. She helped introduce kiwi fruit and other specialty produce to the U.S. and became the first woman to own and operate a company on the Los Angeles wholesale produce market. Frida was 96 years old. Still ahead, we expect China to buy things like soybeans, beef, and pork. But what about wheat? We see what could be next for that market coming up, and later a close encounter of the animal kind. The really big animal kind. Markets were closed Monday due to the Martin Luther King Jr. holiday. In other business news, a big acquisition is now complete. J.R. Simplot Company says it has finalized a deal with Pinnacle Agriculture. The deal was first announced in November. Simplot's agribusiness group now has more than 240 crop input locations across the U.S. and Canada, more than 4,400 employees. The combined Pinnacle and Simplot teams will operate as Simplot Grower Solutions. Simplot is one of the largest privately owned companies in the world. It's expected many U.S. ag products could soon be going to China, but what about wheat? Farm Journal's Tyne Morgan joins us with more in today's analysis.
Here now with Kevin Dooling. All right, Kevin, when you look at the wheat market this week, some decent movement in wheat. Is it because of some of the trade deals? We saw USMCA pass by the Senate. We saw phase one trade deal with China signed. Does that have anything to do with the market action this week?
I don't think so. I mean, a little bit today since we backed off because I was, a little grumpy about the tariff wording, but our wheat markets have basically just been following the world market higher. The Paris wheat has been leading the charge, and the EU, which had a large crop, they are going through it fast. They're feeding a lot of it. They're exporting it. It's the Black Sea's basically out. I mean, they're not out, but they've slowed way down. The U.S. will be next on stage, and we're way ahead of last year's pace. So, no, the major exporters in wheat are going to be down to the pipeline supplies. So, it's nice to see. It's kind of convoluted on the report because they put the Chinese number way up there, and it looks like record stocks, but it's not even close.
Well, and you didn't even mention Russia yet. So talk about Russia import quotas, the change there. Also the change in kind of the leadership there and how that could benefit us or be a detriment.
It throws just a little uncertainty into it. The 20 million metric ton cap that they mentioned just as a potential, that is a non-event. The reason is they don't have that much left to export anyway when they add up the corn and wheat, so it's a non-event at this time.
Okay, though, but looking at some of these forces at play and some of the fundamentals, are you getting a little bullish when it comes to wheat?
Well, I thought we'd have a really good spring, and I don't see any, like old crop wise. We fed so much wheat last summer when wheat was cheaper than corn, and now we've priced ourselves out of that feed channel. It's corn's turn. We're going to feed a whole bunch of new crop wheat when it gets harvested because the corn is going to be so hard to find. So the demand pull in the U.S. is going to be fantastic. And then when you combine that with the low exporter stocks, it's great. So it means high cash basis. Futures, I don't know. They're going to follow along with Paris and the Black Sea.
All right, but it sounds like a little friendlier of a story.
Yes.
Okay, some good to talk about. Kevin, thank you so much. We appreciate it. Stay with us. We'll have much more on Ag Day when we come back.
For a free 2-month sample of Kevin's market analysis, or if you have a question of any kind, call 541-980-4554 or email kdinvestors@gmail.com.
Ag Day, brought to you by Corvus Corn Herbicide from Bayer. Get an early season win against weeds with Corvus for end of season rewards.
Here's something you never want to see headed your way. Major dust storms are engulfing towns in the Australian state of New South Wales. It's reported much of the dust is topsoil from farms. Now, wildfires have devastated parts of several Australian states this summer, and recent heavy rains have caused flash flooding in Victoria, New South Wales, and Queensland. The fires have claimed at least 28 lives in September, destroyed more than 2,600 homes, and burned 25 million acres. Authorities have warned the fire danger will increase this week with rising temperatures and drier conditions. Mike, just a terrible, terrible storm there.
It is.
When you see that wall of dust coming, and we've seen it here in the U.S.
Right. I haven't personally.
Right.
Living in Indiana, the only one was right before a thunderstorm, which was not a big deal. But yeah, in the Western Plains, has to be nasty to see that coming your way.
Absolutely.
Yeah, well, we have some storm systems on the map, but we also have a big dome of high pressure dominating most of the eastern 2/3 of the country right now. A storm system off the East Coast, not going to be a big deal for most areas. It might cause a shower in some of the coastal areas of the southeast. But it's these two systems that we'll be watching as they spread eastward. You can see the one in the Four Corner region starts to spread rain and snow into Texas. Snow and sleet farther north into western Kansas. Next system out west will continue to move through the northern Rockies with some more mountain snow in most areas. A little bit of valley rain there, but it's mainly cold enough for that mountain snow. And you can see as we head through the rest of the day tomorrow, a little bit of light snow from the western Great Lakes down into the Kansas City area, southward from there into Oklahoma and Texas. Most of that is going to be in the form of rain. And this whole system, with putting down all of that moisture in the southwest and also the southern plains, good news. There's still some pretty dry areas in that part of the country anyway. Most areas are not that dry, obviously. Precipitation estimate past 24 hours, not too much. Add in the next 36. You can see we do start to pick up some of that Gulf moisture there, central and eastern Texas into the central plains and also in the Pacific Northwest, putting down some decent moisture. Obviously, some of that will be snow, mainly higher elevations in the Rockies, although we will see a little bit of that light snow like we talked about. Western Great Lakes down into eastern Kansas, northwestern Missouri. High temperatures this afternoon only in the teens in the far northern Mississippi Valley. 40s all the way into northern Florida. That's your first shot of chilly or cold air for you folks who live in Florida for this season. Jacksonville, 29 the low tomorrow morning. That's what the computer models are showing. I would say some areas are probably going to be colder than that. You can see there are teens and 20s then Ohio Valley throughout the Great Lakes. High temperatures tomorrow, I would call these chilly numbers, but not overly cold anywhere in the lower 48. And that's because the jet stream has now kind of trapped the Arctic air once again to the north. These will be shots of colder air behind each of these systems. There's Friday. On through the weekend, that storm system moves eastward again, and that's a little bit of colder air, especially New England, but, you know, the true Arctic air kind of trapped, like I said. That's a look across the country. Now let's take a look at some local forecasts. Heading to Sandpoint, Idaho today, snow and rain showers around, high temperature of 36. Clinton, Oklahoma, mostly cloudy skies on the chilly side, high of 45. And Mackinac City, Michigan, clouds along with a little bit of sunshine, high temperature around 30.
In today's America's Conservation Ag Movement, Nestle says it will invest more than $2 billion to come up with sustainable packaging solutions. The Swiss food and drink company saying it wants to cut its use of virgin plastics by a third by the year 2025. It says it would like to source up to 2 million metric tons of food-grade recycled plastics. The company CEO saying that no plastic should end up in a landfill or as litter, adding that making recycled plastic safe for food is an enormous challenge for the industry, but they want to make more plastics infinitely recyclable. Why one city wants to take a dairy plant to court. Plus, Fairlife is expanding its business. Hear what it thinks will be the new hot market for dairy. Next. A southern Missouri city is suing a dairy plant saying it's regularly releasing untreated wastewater into a river. The concern is in the city of Cabul, Missouri, in the southern part of the state. The city is asking for more than $1 million in its suit against a Dairy Farmers of America plant. It claims it has to spend more money with its own wastewater treatment to take care of the problem. Now, the city is also trying to get an order to have the plant stop releasing what it claims is untreated wastewater into the Big Piney River. Court documents filed in the case say the Missouri Department of Natural Resources found the plant in violation of its treatment permit back in July. Fairlife is adding a new product line, dairy coffee creamers. The creamers will come in 4 different flavors: hazelnut, caramel, vanilla, and sweet cream. The company says the creamers have 40% less sugar than regular coffee creamers. They are also lactose-free. According to a 2019 Mintel report, the coffee category is expected to grow $3 billion by the year 2024. And that means the creamer market is also expected to grow by more than $1.5 billion. Coming up, we love to get out in nature, but this may be a little close. Details on how this all went down next. All one man in Alaska wanted to do was take out the trash, but ended up having a close encounter with nature. Watch what happens here. Curtis Phelps was just carrying a big bag of trash out to his shed on Saturday. His home security captures what happens next. A bull moose with just one antler walks onto the property. Now he takes an interest in Curtis and starts to move towards him. Curtis ducks inside his shed just in time. the moose pushing on the door, but doesn't seem to know what to make of that and eventually strolls off. Phelps escaped after calling his wife on his cell phone. She was inside their home and was able to look outside and give him the all clear. Now, Phelps lives in South Anchorage and says moose are regular visitors. He says 2 years ago, a cow gave birth to a calf in their backyard. Since then, a young moose, possibly the same calf, has been visiting. The Alaska Department of Fish and Game say moose generally are not aggressive, but more people are injured by moose than bear in the state. And there you have it. That's all the time we have this morning. We're sure glad you tuned in. It's been part of your day with us. From all of us here at AgDay, I'm Quentin Griffiths. Have a great day out there in farm country.